Hey everyone, I've just got two quick announcements before we get into today's episode. First of all, a huge thank you for 2,000 downloads. It's been an amazing journey to be on. I've been enjoying the amazing conversations we've been having over the last few months, and I cannot wait to see what happens into the future. Second of all, I have to make a huge apology to Bex from Two Tier Brewer. I mispronounced the name of Bex's podcast last episode. It was really quite embarrassing, and as a journalist, I should have done a lot better of a job. I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to be way more on top of those things. It's something that I always try to get as right as possible, and I have been lacking in it recently. Thank you for everyone for pointing that one out, and on to the episode.
A podcast to honor the gods.
This better come with a sacrifice.
Deus Ex Media.
Hello and welcome to Content and Capable, a podcast all about following your passions while still feeling like a proper adult. My name's Sam and I'm your host. This week I spoke with Jason from Deus Ex Media all about his passion for photography, film, and our appreciation of media. Welcome to Content and Capable, Jason. It's lovely to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
I cannot believe that it has taken this long to have you on the podcast. You would think that, I would at least have you on while the Movie Night Crew was still running, but somehow we even managed to miss that, which I think just goes...
We don't have to talk about the Movie Night Crew. It's fine.
It just goes to show how spectacular I am with my timing. I managed to do this way too often. I'll organize something, have it all set up, and then I realize the timing is just not there. And, no fault of anyone's,
No, the stars weren't there.
Life happens. Yeah. And I not mess it up, but, I'm mildly disappointed in myself.
Don't.
In the way
It's hard to do schedules, and we had to reschedule this podcast, 3 or 4 times?
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 3? Okay.
I think so. I don't know. There is a long chain of messages of you and I going, this date doesn't work for us. This date doesn't work for us. How did we... Yeah. Speaking of work, you've just recently quit your day job to
I did,
pursue some more creative pursuits. Could you talk through some of thinking behind that decision?
Oh, I mean, I don't want to go into it too much because it's only kind of photography related, but so I kind of just started working this office job that worked for, it was kind of like doing insurance verification for hospitals and things like that. And around 2019, I was working there for about 3 years, and I was getting really sick of it, and I was thinking about quitting then, but then the pandemic happened. I had a guaranteed job at a hospital, so I wasn't going to give it up. And but as of recently, I'm just focusing more on, my mental health and going through therapy and everything, and I just found that a job where there's no sense of, it was a job where it's kind of like the mail, where it never truly ends. It's not like there's not more cases to do. There's not more patients to look at. So
yeah,
there was no sense of satisfaction or completion or anything. And the company I was working for was just getting really micromanagey, really I got to tell you, on my last day, they announced that there was going to be more incentive to do overtime. So they were trying to get people to put in as much overtime as possible so they can get down the amount of bills that they haven't done, collected yet. And I shit you not, their incentive was, okay, everybody, if you give us 2 hours of overtime this week, your name will be put in a special raffle so you can win a $10 gift card and an extra 15 minutes on lunch. That's why I had to get out of there.
Yeah. Do people not realize we're not in primary school anymore? And this goes for all work that everyone does. I get incredibly frustrated when a organization comes forward and speaks, especially from I'm doing some PR units at the moment as I finish up my degree. And it's been really insightful because public relations is this weird aspect of communications where you don't just communicate externally to like the world, but you also communicate internally. And it's this whole conversation of like your employees are a form of your stakeholders, and how do you communicate to these people to get what the company wants while they still feel like the company cares about them.
No,
and
it's like I didn't sympathize with my mid-level managers at all, because they had to be the people going to the corporate people and say, why aren't you making us more money? But at the same time, like it was just it's just a really just kind of a gross environment. You don't feel really well valued at a place like that, you know?
No, you don't. And like the whole let's work for free and for exposure, which, ends up in places like photography and journalism, and especially the creative industries. But I've also seen it in engineering and a whole bunch of other places.
Exposure is kind of bullshit, because like anyone can have their own online profile in some way or some sort to like promote themselves. Like I don't know, like that whole thing is just stupid to me.
Well, yeah, and like you, especially when you start out in like photography, you might not have the largest portfolio. Even my parents are guilty of this, and like I would think that my parents were like really aware and really conscious of this kind of stuff. My dad made the comment to me the other week. He goes, "Yeah, but you've got to work for free for like a little while before you actually get paid for your work." I'm like, "Dad, I have a university degree. Like, this is not a." This is not something that like I fiddle around with in my spare time. This takes up almost, a good 30 hours of my week. And I don't take it lightly. It's not, this is, and it's the same with photography, and, filming. Like there are comments that are made because, everyone dabbles in photography and videography from time to time.
How could you not?
Yeah. Well, we all have a phone. Like this is not something that is, completely inaccessible anymore. And it is every now and then I there's a comment that is made, and especially because I really enjoy photography and videography, that like, you should turn up to this event and film this event. I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that if I was being paid for that work.
That's the whole thing. But like getting it's like actually I don't really know what I was gonna say. We could just move on.
As we finally get round to the main topic of this week's episode, what kind of got you into photography?
As I know it, or the way I got to where I am today, as far as photography goes. So I guess I should just kind of start by talking about my grandpa a little bit. He was he was in the Army, and he worked as a communications officer during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And World War II is how he met my grandma. She was in London at the time, and he would analyze and take these kind of like aerial photos, and he just kind of ended up getting into photography as a side thing. And when both of my grandparents died on that side of the family about 4 years ago, we were going through my my all their possessions, because they live out in Texas, so we went to go visit my uncle, and he had this camera, which I'm going to show you right here. And
amazing.
Yeah, and I know this doesn't bode well, or this doesn't serve well for a podcast, but this is a what I'm holding right now is a camera called a Yashica Mat 24. It's what's known as a TLR camera, which is twin lens reflex. So if you've ever seen like old photos or old cameras that kind of look like a boxy rectangle with two things, and it also has this, which is the actual viewfinder. So it's like kind of like this cool prism. And I picked it up, and it was just kind of lying around my uncle's place, and I didn't really know what it was. And I was just like so captivated by it. I was looking through the viewfinder and just kind of being interested in the mechanics of it and everything. I really didn't know anything about photography. I didn't know anything about exposure or shutter speed or film ISO, or I certainly didn't know anything about film photography. And my uncle was just like, you can keep that if you want. Like, I'm pretty sure it works. And so I took it home with me back to Virginia, and I bought a roll of film, and I put it through its paces, and I started to kind of figure it out a little bit, and then I went to go get it developed. And when I got it back, I got these really neat pictures that I for some reason I didn't anticipate would captivate me in a certain way, but I kind of caught the bug then, because I just really liked filming with these type of old cameras. I really like old gear in general. Like I still play music on turntables and stuff like that. I'm just kind of fascinated with analog tech, if that makes any sense. And
I think that it's very interesting, and it's a trend that has kind of persisted a lot longer than I thought it was. This desire to use older equipment, and I think it really speaks to the robustness of that equipment, that this technology still persists and people still find new and interesting ways to experiment with it, which is very fascinating.
No, that's a great point, because the thing about these cameras is that there's very few electrical. This is also my 35 millimeter camera that I'm holding. There's very few electrical components to it, and the stuff that's in place can be pretty easily repaired. The problem with a lot of electronics today is, once it breaks, it kind of just becomes landfill, And there is I do have an appreciation for something that was, I mean, the cameras that I own were made in about the 70s, so that was about 50 years ago, and they still work fine. I can't even get a Tamagotchi from the 90s to work.
Yeah. With all the plastic that is, yeah.
Yeah, and
it is fascinating because we don't and it's part is they don't make things like they used to, but the other is doing things manually, and the reward and the endorphins that you get out of doing something manually and it working.
Yeah. When you work in film photography, there is a huge margin for error, because especially when you're just starting, because I learned my photography basics with film. So I had to there's a joke amongst photographers that your first 10,000 photos will suck. They will suck. Mm-hmm. You will hate them. Only after that point will you start to appreciate your own work. And that rule is even tougher when you shoot on film, because you can only shoot, a 35 millimeter roll has 36 exposures or 24. And you can't see the result until weeks later. So there's a long period of time where you're just kind of wondering, did I expose that one shot right? Did I do that right? And when you get it back, there is a huge reward, but there's also a huge sense of utter crippling dread. Oh God, I messed it up. Cause when the stars are just right, and when you get the exposure right, you get the focus just right, and you get that, image back from your developer, it can feel really good. It's kind of and it feels like Christmas, kind of, there's that sense of anticipation in getting your photos back. So it's the highs are really high and the lows are really low.
Yeah.
And but everyone I talk to about film photography says, they kind of appreciate that. They kind of appreciate that something they take for granted, something like a photograph, which you can take, like we said, on your phone, pretty much anywhere. Mm. And they said there was an appreciation they had for it. Might be part nostalgia, because there was a time when, most people I know had to wait 24 hours to get photos developed, and then you get them in the folder and you look over them, and that's a ritual that I remember really fondly.
Oh yeah, 100%. Even myself, who, is only 20 years old and has spent the majority of my childhood around, cameras inside of phones. Mm. Most of the photos of my childhood were captured on film and developed and printed and then put into photo albums. And in fact, I still do go through the photo albums of my childhood and look at all the different photos that my parents took.
Yeah.
And it is part nostalgia, but part, oh wait, we were living at a different pace of life with our photos.
It does,
and,
yeah.
Photography was way more important and valued, whereas, I could snap 1,000 photos within a minute very easily on an iPhone. And, that lowers the value of each individual photo.
Yeah, and I I wouldn't say, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, there is a sense of like, oh God, this shot is going to cost me exactly 25 cents, so I better get it right. But also, like, I don't want to like disparage like digital technology too much because I mean, obviously I use it like every day, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like I like kind of what you said. It just kind of brings back a certain appreciation for things because yeah, you couldn't just do everything so easily. We grew up in kind of like, because being a 90s kid, you grow up with the thing they say about my generation is that they kind of experienced the end of the pre-digital era and then witnessed the birth of the digital era. And it's been kind of cool to see how I remember the attitude towards a lot of this stuff back then was like digital cameras are going to kill film because why wouldn't they? They're a lot cheaper and they're a lot cheaper to own, and you know you could just put them all on your computer and never have to worry about anything. You know, I don't blame people for going towards digital because film is it's a fucking headache. You know.
Yeah.
And I can't and God, even shooting movies on film, like, you know, doing that boggles my mind. You know, because it's just such a intricate process and there's so many factors you can mess up.
Yeah, and I think it also, like, I don't know, it values different parts of your life differently as well. You know, when I was in the US, a lot of the motivation I had for taking photos was to document my travels and, you know, oh look, I went and saw this, and you know, I'll go and see my extended family in a couple of weeks' time and we'll have some sort of slideshow of my US trip because, you know, I went away and we like sharing those travels. But the other part of it is like, I like, you know, having photos of myself that I could go and share with other people and go, look, here's like a really fun photo of myself doing something cool. And like proof, you know, pics or it didn't happen, you know.
Right.
Whereas the photos of my childhood were of random things. There is a photo of myself and 3 of my siblings in, you know, pots, you know, rather large pots that used to have trees in them, on the front lawn of our house while Dad is planting a rather large hedge, you know, at the front of the house. And, you know, there are all kinds of different photos and videos from that time that it is just fascinating to, you know, the different values and the reasonings behind each of those photos.
Yeah, it's almost like, what was I thinking? Darn it. So you were saying, yeah, it's almost like, I think what the cool thing about photography in general is how the meaning of an image can kind of, or the emotional attachment behind an image can kind of change over time. Because you're right, there are a lot of like, I've gone through some of my old pictures as well, and I've also helped out a few family members by getting old rolls of film developed from like disposable cameras that never got done. And there is just like mundane stuff. It's just kind of like, you know, a Christmas tree from a specific undetermined year, or it could just be like it could be something as funny as like, you know, the 5-year-old got the camera and did something, you know, took like a bad shot of the wall, it's all crooked or something. But it's something you kind of take for granted because you're surrounded by, let me put it this way, like when you take a photograph in the street, and really at the time you're just kind of taking a picture of, I don't know, a stop sign, maybe the storefront, and a 2005 Toyota Highlander, you know? It might look pretty ordinary now, but in like 10 years, who know what that, I mean, that car will be considered vintage, you know, in a few years, in some, if you kind of think about it. And it's just kind of cool how looking at an image that's you consider pretty mundane at first can be like, oh, I remember that house, or I remember that, you know, that chair when we used to have it, and stuff like that. You know, it just kind of brings back the warm fuzzies a little bit.
It jogs the memory a little bit as well. We are so bombarded with information that it is quite hard to keep track of what's going on. Even today, I was having a conversation with my immediate boss and the station manager about some projects that we're working on at the radio station. And it was like, oh, wait a second, what are our priorities here in this meeting? And like remembering, oh, this is exactly what we're supposed to be talking about, and I kind of was able to take lead, but then was like having to really make sure that the conversation kept on track. And we do forget to keep remembering things that have happened. There are, and I think this is where like Facebook memories do a really good job at like reminding people of things. So like 10 years ago we went to Canada. So in January of this year, my mother was sharing photos of us in Canada. We got stuck in LA for 12 hours. So there's this post that my mum wrote using the LA airport Wi-Fi, talking about how we've been stuck in LA for 12 hours and we're hoping we might get into Vancouver tonight, and a whole bunch of things. There's this massive photo of every single one of the bags we took with us laid out on our living room floor, because we unpacked and repacked everything the morning that we left because we were looking for something. And I vividly remember that stuff, but only after I went and looked through all the photos that my mother shared at the time of, we were doing this and this is what was happening, and we left, and then quite conveniently it decided to start flooding while we were away, and so we were like reading the news and it's like, oh, it's flooding back home,
right,
and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. But all these different memories then start to be jogged, and you remember everything based on the one or two photos you might have seen.
Right. Yeah. And going back to what you were saying earlier about how film kind of gives you a certain appreciation for things, I think the real one of the big reasons that draws photographers to film is that it makes you stop for a second, because you kind of just, you need to look at the landscape a little bit better. You need to get a lay of the land. You need to make sure everything is precise before each shot. And what a lot of photographers that I've talked to or that I've heard on YouTube videos or podcasts, they say they appreciate something like that, because when they're working in their day-to-day photography jobs, they have to use digital cameras, and because they do weddings or they do events and stuff, and they just go because they're just they have to get every single image possible. And it's almost like a lot of photographers use film as a way to unwind or a way to like practice their real artistic craft, because it's a way to kind of get away from the hectic. I don't know. I don't want to say like shooting with digital is hectic, but shooting with an old camera that doesn't have a screen on the back and having to look through a lens and having to do manual exposure, which is kind of tricky. And so yeah,
I think there's a beauty in the practice of taking the time to frame a photo properly and putting all the elements of the image you want in together, taking the time to make sure your ISO and your shutter speed are correct, and then taking the photo, and that whole process that whole journey from idea through to execution, and then obviously the development of the photo and the time and the effort that takes. I think that it is, because when you go to look at commercial photography, so I'm in the process of hiring photographers for a ball that I'm running at the moment, and it is a really interesting process of like judging people's ability to capture the moment and capture as many different aspects of an event or a moment as possible. Whereas, if I was looking at someone's photography of, how good of a photographer I think that they are just in general, I would be probably looking at their more carefully framed photos and the way that they construct these photos and how how their body of work interacts with each other, rather than, can you take a photo of this event? Are you going to be good at taking photos of faces? Do your photos look good? Are they going to fit the vibe that, the event is going to be? Yeah,
it's a complex thing being kind of a photographer in the background doing those kind of events, because it's like half being in the moment, half being out of the moment. Like you have to not engage, but you also have to observe and just be on the fly, because a lot of the shots I take are on the spot. Usually it's like inspiration strikes and I just take a shot. I'm sorry, can we go back to, I can't remember, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about capturing moments. Oh yeah, so I mean, for example, like when I went to my friend's wedding back in the spring, and I took my camera with me. I was just a guest, and it was kind of nice because I brought my old camera that my grandfather had, and for one, it's a great conversation starter because people just don't see cameras like that anymore. So older people will come up to me and be like, I used to have a camera like that. Holy crap! And or people will ask me if I'm taking people will ask me if it's a movie camera because it has this crank at the side, so it goes like that was a terrible noise.
Yeah.
But I liked the result was I was able to kind of capture the moments in between like the big photography moments. Because like obviously when you get your wedding, you want the glamorized photos, you want like the first look photos, you want the best man photos, you want the family photos, but to me, like those kind of those photos don't really capture the memory of that day very well. And I like the photos that are kind of in between stuff, watching guests do things. And it was kind of nice to just give these photos to, once I got the photos back, they were just of kind of guests enjoying themselves. It was just kind of the scenery. It was kind of the wedding before it even really started. And they were really appreciative. They said, these don't look like the photos that we paid for, but we like, it's kind of cool that you captured like a different side to our wedding and everything. And that
I also think especially being someone who's not being paid to take professional photos, capturing the imperfections of the day as well.
Yeah, less pressure.
A very interesting thing. Yeah. Like, for example, when my parents got married, it was within a month after the 9/11 attacks.
Oh.
And by chance, the day after the 9/11 attacks, the largest domestic airline in the country at the time collapsed. And things happened. People didn't make it to the wedding. So you have a look at some of these photos, and there are photos of like aspects of the family missing, aunts and uncles, and my mother's family all made it down, but my father's family, who were way more scattered around the country, didn't all make it to the wedding. And then I have a look at photos of my mother walking towards the wedding and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that she was 6 months pregnant at the time, but you have a look at the photos and you go, oh wow, the professional photographer hid that. But that would have been like a really interesting aspect to see that, because it does tell a different aspect to the story of the fact that this wedding was had 3 months before I was born. And it is a very fascinating aspect of the history of our family that this has happened. And it is fascinating, some of the things that photographers choose to hide. My little sister and my little brother were ring bearer and flower girl for one of our aunts and uncles' weddings. I'm not quite sure which, because all my aunts and uncles' weddings on my dad's side ended up happening in such quick succession that it feels like a blur to child me. But there is the photo that we keep of that wedding is a photo of my little sister and brother that I think my father took on my mother's phone or something, or the photographer took, and my sister has like a saw on the side of her mouth, and my little brother looks like an evil gremlin, and they're both 15 and 16 at the moment, would hate the fact that I'm bringing up this photo. But those little imperfections of oh wait, this is the not quite perfect but just as interesting aspects of a day, and having that other perspective. You almost want to hire two different companies. You do the professional photos and you do the take photos of everything, and we'll see what sticks.
Yeah, right. The investment photos, I'm gonna really like these in 30 years.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so fascinating to see the different approaches that people have to their photography, and the journeys that people have into photography as well, because obviously you've got a really familial connection, but other people have really technical or artistic, or so many different ways you can get into photography, that it isn't quite just limited to you take photos. That's not the limit of where photography can take people.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do with because if you think of photography more as just kind of painting with light, it kind of opens it just opens your mind to new possibilities. You can do long exposures where you can write a message with like a fireworks sparkler or something where, you know, it'll look like there's letters written in sparks. There's like cool stuff you can do. One of the first tricks I did with long exposure was just to take a picture of a river with the lens open at, you know, it's a slow shutter speed, which means, you know, it's capturing every little raindrop or little drop that falls as it's passing in front of the camera. So the water has a very smooth texture to it. It doesn't look natural. It almost looks kind of ghostly and creepy. And you've probably seen exposures of like long exposures of like waterfalls and stuff like that. But you can also do like night photography, and you can get into landscape photography. You can get into portraits. You can get into studio work if you want to work with models. You can be journalist. You can do it's such a broad field, and there's so much room for artistic expression. And you're right, there is a technical aspect to it, because the fact that a camera is just it's a bunch of working parts. It's a bunch of tiny working parts working in succession to just pull off one function. There's something kind of neat about that. And I find like a lot of people I talk to about cameras do kind of just nerd out about the specs of them. They're like, oh, you got this lever that can do that, or it can go up to this shutter speed and stuff. And yeah, there's craftsmanship to appreciate with like these old cameras. But we already talked about that and how they still work and everything.
Yeah, it almost like satisfies the weird like tech enthusiasts that in people as well, you know, not necessarily having the latest and greatest, but like, look what the interesting things this camera can do, or like this different approach to the technology. Especially with early cameras, you find, you know, as you said, you know, the first camera that you picked up had, you know, 2 lenses, and it's like that's not something we normally see in cameras nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And so experimenting with the different impacts that, you know, technological decisions in the very creative development of photography, and then also like using cameras in interesting ways. I have watched my friends on numerous occasions pull out a camera and use it in a way that I completely did not expect them to use it to take a photo, and you know, the products that come out being insanely beautiful and really interesting to look at.
I get pretty impressed just seeing what people can do on TikTok with their phones. You know, just kind of. I'm seeing more and more people do kind of like in-camera tricks and stuff like that, just to kind of manipulate the camera or manipulate the effect, or like the green screen effect, so you can do whatever you want with it. And there's something about like these old cameras too. There's a sensory thing to them that I really like, because you know, they're not heavy, but they're not light either. They got a weight to them. And one of my favorite things, honestly, about cameras is just hearing like the grinds gear the gears grind and the shutter going off. Like I'm just gonna like shoot the shutter and see if you can hear it. Could you pick that?
So satisfying,
right? And just imagine just like feeling that in your hands and feeling like that click like go off every time. It can almost like inspire me to take photos. I'm like, I like feeling this in my hands. I'm gonna go outside today, you know?
Yeah. Oh, and even on a modern DSLR, which was where I got, you know, first trained on manual photography, the satisfaction of lining things up and having your ISO and the lighting and your shutter speed and everything else, you know, in the right order, and then the satisfying click of, you know, you pressing the shutter and the photo being taken. Oh. And obviously you get that instant gratification with like a DSLR in the digital format, but you have a look and it's like, oh, this worked. And it is almost like a mini celebration of like, especially when you're first starting and you do start to take some like really successful photos of like, oh wait, this is actually working, and I'm like manipulating the light around me to create these awesome images.
Yeah. Actually, like speaking of shutters, I'm gonna bring like a camera with a really good one. All right. So this is a camera I'm actually borrowing from Tina's husband Sean, and this is a an old it's called a Hasselblad 500 cm, which is a very popular camera. If you know the Elvis Costello album, the newest model, it's the camera that's on the cover. But anyway, this has like one of the best shutters I've ever heard in my life.
Oh wow, it's like a double. Wow.
Yeah, because if you look at it from this way, it's like could you see that?
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
I just like, I will go outside just to hear that clicking noise, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
And it is
it's kind of like when I put on a record or something, kind of like just putting that needle slowly on the groove and then hearing that little, and then the music starts playing.
I think
it's just amazing.
I think
it's almost like magic, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like, and it's a very interesting commentary on like the weird sanitization we do have of like awkward sounds and things that, you know, stick out. You know, you listen to a record, there is going to be like that weird background noise. And in podcast editing, and I've been thinking about this very recently because I'm writing and developing some training courses for some journalists, and I'm about to work with some podcast producers on, you know, podcast production advisory stuff. And it is really fascinating because I spent an exorbitant amount of time this week talking about getting rid of background noise and making it sound like you're sitting in a professional studio. You know, I'm sitting in my bedroom at 20 to 12 at night recording this podcast. And, you know, it is, there is no soundproofing. The floor is made of wood. The most soundproofing in this room is my duvet that is sitting on my bed where I was lying, you know, beforehand. But like I spend an exorbitant amount of effort making the audio sound really professional, where, you know, there is this now very interesting heading back towards, you know, the manual on the awkward sounds and things not having to sound 100% perfect, and, you know, mistakes being allowed to be made, because is what makes us human. And, you know, we're not quiet creatures. And, you know, so when you take a photo and it makes, you know, a lovely huge double shutter sound, and it gives us that extra little bit of satisfaction. Or you listen to a record and you hear the just a little bit of interference in the background. And it just makes the experience and the ambiance way more satisfying.
Yeah, it's a topic I think a lot about, because part of me is thinking, am I just like nostalgic for the old days, like of how like photos used to look or how movies used to look and stuff like that? Am I just a grandpa? Am I just being a fuddy-duddy? But the fact that things like, I don't know, you see like VHS filters all the time. You see, you know, I mean, Hollywood movies today will even try to simulate what's called film grain, where, you know, it's because, you know, they tried to like digitally make this analog look. And I just think it's how interesting it is. It's this technology that was born out of necessity and then kind of migrated into obscurity, and now is being picked up for almost like an aesthetic reason, because film does look a certain way for sure. It's one of the reasons that I gravitate so much towards it. The fact that, you know, like when you do take a picture with a digital camera, you know, it's kind of, it's light hitting a light sensor that has, you know, a series of pixels. What I like about film that's so special is that the way film is made, or what makes up a roll of film, is that it's a bunch of layers of different chemicals over a layer of what's called silver highlight crystals. And those are the photosensitive crystals that take in the light. So they kind of act as the light sensor in a digital camera. And what's interesting about film is that each frame of a negative has a completely unique distribution of crystals. So no matter what you do to try to imitate or try to replicate that one photo, you can never 100% do it, because it's its own unique piece of art. Like I do really romanticize this stuff, but I do think there is something special about, you know, when you're watching a movie, you know, 1 second of footage is 24 frames of 24 negative frames. So just in that 1 second of footage, you're seeing 24 individual kind of light paintings going in succession. And that's what I was talking about with film grain earlier, is that part of me was wondering, like, because so the silver highlight crystals actually create the grain. That's why there's kind of like a sandy quality to film, I guess is like the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it just diffuses light in its own special way. And I don't know, there's something really cool about the fact that when you're watching a movie, it's just a bunch of almost like individual little paintings going in succession. And when you have, it creates kind of like this otherworldly look that makes it look more like a piece of art to me. It makes it look not quite real, because I don't know, like if you watch like some movies that were shot on film and, you know, they're properly scanned and everything, they can still look gorgeous. You know, I've watched movies that got transferred to 4K that were shot on film, and the way film just kind of handles lights and shadows and colors is just a little different, and people go out of their way today to kind of capture that look digitally. And part of me is thinking, like, is there something about, because when you put that many images in order, there's always kind of this little haze, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
It's it brings me back to my childhood, especially because I was a kid in the early 90s, so movies were still, you know, projected using a film reel. So you would see like the little dust marks, you would see like the tiny bits of hair that maybe got onto the negative. And something about me just like noticing that when I was younger, but I didn't know what I was looking at. And now that I, you know, am a film enthusiast and everything, and I use the actual material that some of these movies were made with in a very broad sense, it's just like this crap is amazing, and this is an amazing art form. Because I mean, I'm just gushing right now, but yeah.
Yeah.
I have a really special attachment to movies, and I mean, like recently, Tina and I, and I think it was Haley and Boothby, we were watching. No, wait, Haley wasn't there, but we were watching Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one.
Yeah.
And that was shot on film. Most movies that were shot up until the 2010s were shot on film, and there's something about
even television. I was working at a TV station in 2018, and they were talking about how they've only really recently transferred to digital filming.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, because it takes forever, because it's so expensive for them to transition that technology.
Yeah.
So a lot of their stuff was still being filmed on, you know, reusable and rewritable, but film tapes, you know, and, you know, running through those and digitizing them, and that took extra time.
Yeah,
of course. But, you know, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, I've only seen it in Hollywood. There has been a resurgence of, you know, using film for movies recently. I say recently, but like this maybe goes back to maybe like 2016. I think one of the big highlights for me was when Star Wars the Force Awakens came out. That was part of the promotion, was that this is going to be shot on film and this is not going to be digital. And I part of me was like really excited. And there is a distinct look to it, but unfortunately it is so expensive and it is a lengthy process. And when you work with film, like obviously you got to get it right. And if you have to do reshoots, that's going to be even more expensive. So really only like big studios can afford to shoot on film. Because I've heard how much it costs to make like an indie film or make a short film on film, because people like want to try that. They want to make stuff on 16 millimeter cameras or even 35 millimeter cameras. And it's a huge barrier of entry. So usually, I mean, the most ridiculous thing I've seen recently was that the new Jurassic World movie was shot on film. And part of me is like, cool, like the original was shot on film. That's neat, I guess. But I'm just thinking, like, it must make the film so much more expensive, and they gotta make all that money back. So, but they have to, they do it for like stuff that is going to do gangbusters, like a Jurassic World movie or a Star Wars movie is gonna do really well.
We always know that they're gonna make money.
Yeah.
And I think it is fascinating where like the business case does go, well, yeah, we can use this technology that, you know, is maybe way more finicky, way more expensive, but, you know, will deliver a more unique quality of image
Yeah.
than, filming digitally, where, the sensor is the same, and we're not having, as you said, the changes in crystals between each frame,
Yeah.
and everything else that does make filming on film so much more unique.
Yeah,
and it is very fascinating.
I think you can definitely see the there's if you're into Marvel, like there's definitely a tone shift between how the movies kind of look on a color grading level and kind of a lighting level. If you watch stuff from like the first Iron Man to I think like Thor was shot on film, and I think the first Captain America movie was shot on film. It started, but once we started getting more into the 2010s, they made the shift to digital, and it's not a bad change, but I would say it's a noticeable change. I would kind of ask people to look at the newest Marvel property and then go back and watch the original Iron Man and see if there's something about the way the colors kind of, I don't know. I've talked about colors and grain enough, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it is so interesting and finicky, and it even reminds me of, like, in music we talk about this concept of timbre and talking about how different things sound.
Yeah.
And it goes everything from voices to instruments, and it's the same with color, where there are so many different ways that the way color is perceived it can be changed, and even just the simple decision to use film over using a digital format changes the way, and am thinking about it because I have seen the first Iron Man film probably more times out of most Marvel movies. And it is very much visually distinct from if you have a look at, the latest Avengers movie. And not to say that it's bad, it's just different.
Like Avengers Endgame wouldn't exist. I don't think Avengers Endgame could exist if they tried to shoot it on film. Like, I do not blame them for doing that massive a project on digital, because I mean, from what I've heard of Marvel, there's like a lot of moving parts going, like constant rewrites and stuff like that, constant reshoots.
Yeah.
So doing that on film, like, I don't blame them for just sticking to digital. Because they have to pull off this
100%.
whole cinematic universe thing. But back when they were on like their own solo movies, it was kind of like a neat little oddity of the MCU, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I think it's also like something that's very interesting that'll be within the history of, filmmaking and film production, where, when these big projects did start, we were still of the belief that film was the most cost-efficient, time-efficient, malleable.
Yeah, because I guess for a while,
format.
digital cameras needed to like catch up to Hollywood standards. I think that was what caused the delay.
And, it's the same in a lot of professions, cameras on phones really weren't great until probably around the iPhone 5.
Oh my God,
around 2012 to 2015, where they started getting good enough and customizable and adjustable enough that, we're like, well, now there's a use case for this.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have a look at the latest, phones that are being released now, and those cameras are arguably better quality than, some DSLRs.
Mm-hmm.
And, in certain conditions outperform. And, I always make the joke to my mother about, which of our phone cameras is best, especially around this time of year with so many birthdays going on, where we film, the happy birthday song ends up being filmed. And it's like, well, whose phone is best to record in a low light setting with everyone chanting happy birthday? But, it's very fascinating because you have a look at some of those early videos that my mother took of that on her phone, and they are dodgy. Like, there are not many pixels.
No,
and then you have a look at, you have a look at the video that was taken, last week at my little brother's birthday, and it, you can make out pretty much all the details, including, watching my siblings get up to their antics non-verbally, which is not something that you probably would have seen.
Yeah.
And
to carry off of that, like, film is from a preservation standpoint. Digital has that kind of like awkward teenage phase where, the technology wasn't really there yet. So the videos and pictures that you did capture, can't be really made any better. You can't really add more pixels to like an old image. So what's cool about film is that, I mean, you have films from the 30s that are getting, 4K restorations now. Film has a good shelf life as far as resolution goes. So we've seen movies go from, in terms of home video, we've seen them go from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray. Now we have 4K, and it's kind of theorized that the way film is set up and the way film captures light and everything, and the way just how like intricately complicated like each negative of a film is, it's going to stand up to scanning technology for a good few more decades, most likely. Whereas you have there's this movie that I've always been interested about. It's actually there's a few movies from that kind of era where they were shot on early digital cameras, like top of my head, 28 Days Later, the zombie movie. It was shot with a early digital camera. It has a very distinct, like, pixely look to it. And David Lynch, a director I likes to use cheap digital cameras to, like, for a certain aesthetic. It doesn't bode well for future, like, if you want to get, like, future home releases or future files or certain scans of the movie that you can show at film festivals or whatever. Digital. Yeah, they're trying though. They are creating like AI to kind of catch up and smooth everything out a little bit, but there's still like an artificial factor to it that some people just don't really like.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think every evolution we've had of the way photography has come from early cameras through to the cameras on the back of our phones, including the early 2000s quintessential digital camera, through to DSLRs and the resurgence of films, even, and what I find very fascinating, the uprise in Polaroid use as well.
Oh yeah.
And like the easy kind of accessible foray into film that you can have in Polaroids, and the traditional Polaroids through to the modern ones. Even my friend was talking about how he bought himself like a Polaroid printer to print photos he's taking normally on his phone as Polaroids.
Yeah.
And remembering things in a physical format. I think we are there is value in every aspect, and people who choose to investigate and work with every aspect, it's very interesting to watch.
Oh yeah, I had a Polaroid when I was younger, and it's this one that I'm holding right now. I actually won it at like an auction, like a silent auction, and I was maybe like 10, and I was just so. It's just so it's so cool, It's just such a neat little device, and Polaroids is so perfect because you snap a quick moment. You only have to wait a few minutes, and then there's a physical thing, and you can like give it to people. There's something about that, like the way Polaroids are just kind of, they're just like the perfect size to just kind of hand to someone.
Yeah, the Pokemon card size, which I argue is the best size for anything.
Exactly.
The closer an object can get to being the size of a Pokemon card, the more successful I think it is. Look at phones and how close of a size they are to Pokemon cards nowadays. I should stop comparing things to Pokemon cards because it's making me realize we had Pokemon cards banned in school.
Mine too.
Yeah, just ridiculousness. The teachers not understanding that this was something they could, use to make us behave instead of, just outright banning.
Yeah,
anyway.
They didn't want us. Yeah, we were. It was a problem. We were like trading during class and with stuff like that. We weren't supposed to be doing that.
Oh, there were so many arguments, but like, come on, this is how we like learn to interact.
We're socializing, guys. Come on.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. But yeah. So as you've gotten involved in photography and experimented and had a go, what has been some of the things you've noticed over especially your recent experiences with your approach to photography nowadays?
I guess the biggest thing that it does for me is it changes the way I look at the world. Because Photography is so much more than just taking a picture of like an object. That was kind of the trap I got in early to practice. You take like photos of old cars or stop signs or something like that, and you learn that you need to stop taking pictures of things and learn how to create kind of like a snapshot of time. And you have to learn how shadows bounce off of each other, and you need to be aware of when the sun's going to go down because the lighting is really good, and you have to be aware of I don't know, my style of photography that I really like is seeing beauty in kind of the mundane. I kind of like just walking around and taking a picture of normal things, but you take them in an interesting way. You look at where your horizon is. You look at where you try to put something in the foreground to establish depth or something like that. Or you use you expose the shadows in a certain way where they'll appear completely black, and it'll give a more like contrasty image. And it's just kind of made me. I mean, for one thing, it kind of helps me get out more because I'm kind of a house cat, and I like to stay inside a lot. But photography is like it. I mean, we bring up Pokemon, but it is kind of like Pokemon a little bit, where you're like, I'm gonna go and I've heard about this like one place in Richmond. I'm gonna go there and like see if I can snap it really quick. And it's almost like you collect all these like just little. I don't know. The Pokemon analogy's falling apart already, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely like, and the way I heard someone describe it recently, I was watching a YouTube video about how photography changes our perception and how we remember events in time, and how it affects our memory in general. And the way I heard someone describe it was, often the more work that is put in, the more we remember it, or the longer time between taking the photo and seeing the final product, the more value that is placed on that. Mm-hmm. But, being able to go outside and, it is amazing weather today. I'm going to go outside and take this really lovely photo with this perfect lighting. It is very fascinating. In fact, the headshots that I use, including the stuff on the Deus Ex Media website at the moment, is from a photo shoot that I did in my first semester university, where we were doing, profiles on each other, and the one of the other students took these really lovely photos of me, with this beautiful lighting and everything lined up really lovely. And I've kept those photos and continue to use them, much to the disgust of some of my siblings, which is another issue entirely. But, continue to use these photos because they're like really lovely photos of myself that like we worked on together and created. And, it was a collaborative process. We all have these like lovely photos of each other that we took that, reminds me of the start of my journalism degree, pre-pandemic of all things. Also, is a great memento and a great, useful aspect for, I have to submit headshots to, to organizations when, they hire me. And these are always very interesting.
Yeah. It is kind of cool when there's a story or like an adventure behind something, because I mean, some of the most, I don't get to shoot like very often is kind of the problem. It's kind of like a whole thing with time management, but it's like when I take the time to actually go outside, and usually I like to shoot by myself so I can just kind of be with my thoughts and just be more no distractions.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like a night shoot I did where I just walked around downtown Richmond. It was freezing cold, but I took some of like the best pictures I ever did. And just recently I was at I took pictures at a protest about the whole Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision last month.
Yeah.
And I took pictures at Black Lives Matter protests. I took pictures. We have these statues that are all around, or we used to. We used to have these statues all around Richmond, and those would be huge gathering sites, especially during 2020. And I mean, in hindsight, that's really special to me because now I have these little pieces of kind of local history.
Yeah,
to myself,
100%.
and I'll always like remember that shoot, and it's just kind of, it's just so cool, you know.
It is. And it's really fascinating. The memories and the thoughts and the feelings that are stirred up by film and by photography. Even, I have journalism professors who talk about the profound impact that photos do give to, stories. Or, there is a whole class of journalism, which is just visual journalism, where people take photos that tell stories. And things like protest movements, the tearing down of statues, even just like day-to-day lives of people, and documenting that in photography form really tell viewers more information than they would really glean from a written essay.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a disconnect between someone's day-to-day life and what's written in a book. But when you take a photo, you're peering into a window that directly sees exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and what's cool with it's like each picture is like kind of your own interpretation of reality a little bit. It's like how you see the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I mean what you said earlier about, a photo should tell a story. That's what I mean, I love keeping that in mind, and I love kind of arranging my environment, like, because I used to be into drawing, and I used to be into art. And something I was always really frustrated with was I wanted to make things photorealistic, but I couldn't. I couldn't practice enough, and I couldn't get good at it. But that's why photography kind of clicked for me. It's no pun intended. Just the fact that I can just go into an environment, have all these assets around me, like a tree or a person sitting on a bench, or like a smokestack in the background, or and just thinking like, how can I arrange all these elements to provoke some kind of emotion? Because you can just kind of look at a person sitting on a sidewalk. Maybe you put like a dog next to him or something, and you're like, why is that guy sitting down? Or what's going on with him? What's going on with the dog? Why is it this time of day? Like, what does that sign in the background mean? It's just like it's kind of like it's taking advantage of things like that cinematographers use a lot, which is just kind of like you said, visual. It's visual storytelling, and it kind of appeals to the human nature on an almost like subconscious level, which I just think is infinitely cool.
And, by the nature of creating these images, you learn how you process images. And, even like when I did film and television in high school, a lot of people were like, oh, isn't that going to like ruin the way you watch movies forever?
Yeah.
And what I learned through, the 5 or 6 years that I did this class was that it didn't actually ruin the way that I, viewed film or advertising or photos. It actually allowed me to like separate my enjoyment and my analysis of these things. I didn't feel the need to analyze movies. I can watch a trashy movie and enjoy it for what it is, rather than having to analyze why it's a bad thing, but then still be able to manage to hold a decent conversation about why I think decisions were made. And be able to do both, but most importantly enjoy and when you understand the craft and the effort that goes into things, you enjoy, I think, that way more than you would if you didn't quite understand the amount of effort and time. And
people get different things out of shows or TV or shows and movies, and it does make it a little nicer because I was super into, because DVDs were like great, because I used to watch like behind the scenes stuff on the special features like all the time, because I found like the craft of filmmaking just as admirable as like the story you're getting from the film. I mean, some of the most amazing behind the scene features are movies that I really like Jurassic Park and The Thing, Star Wars, and a couple of them are kind of like visual effects and camera and cinematography related. I just like the way these movies look, and to some people, they don't really look at movies like that. They look at it as a form of escapism, but if you create with cameras and you get a sense for like basics of film and visual storytelling, it it does kind of ruin the magic like a little bit, because it's like the sausage getting made, like, you know how like this is done. But at the same time, when it's done really well, it gives you a whole new appreciation for a movie. There will be some times when I watch a movie, you know, when I was younger and didn't really appreciate it for what it was. And now when I'm older, I'm like, this is amazing. Like I get why I didn't get this when I was younger, but like I can't believe that, you know, this made me feel something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things that like I think that of everything that you consume, you have a greater appreciation for the time and effort that's gone into it. You know, I can never get over the amount of work that it is put into creating news programming.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, I know exactly what is required and the amount of effort and time and the moving parts and the money that is behind that. You know, something that we might take for granted. Oh, I'm just going to turn the news on TV, or oh, what's making headlines today?
They're not thinking about, you know, when the camera angles change, or when, you know, they're cutting to different footage while someone is talking. You know, that's all being decided like as it's happening, right? Like in those kind of editing broadcasting rooms.
Oh yeah, and like you know, the fast turnarounds and the insane amount of work and the multidisciplinary,
especially for a 24 hours news cycle. You know, it's definitely not what it used to be.
100%. And like, you know, you look at even like if you have a look at the foreign correspondents from another nation. So, for example, the ABC here in Australia, if you have a look at their foreign correspondents, they've got, you know, I think there's maybe about 20 foreign correspondents who work permanently overseas. And that's everything from Europe to a Washington correspondent to an American correspondent to, you know, a London correspondent. And, you know, but these people write and produce stories at a pace that you, and independently of, you know, a normal traditional newsroom, and at a pace that is almost unheard of and unfathomable.
And you have to try to fit in commercials.
It is moving so fast. Oh yeah, you know, there's room to fit in commercials. These stories, you know, often have so many different facets to them as well, and you don't even like, you have a look at it now and you go, this is just normal. You know, you have a look at CNN. And I have a professor who worked there for a very long time. And he talks about the first day he walking into the CNN building in Atlanta. I think it's Atlanta. And it's huge. Like, it is a massive, there's basically a hotel inside, you know, this place is massive. And that, you know, this is just normal for these people, you know, but like the movements that go on behind, as well as, you know, watching a journalist. If you watch a journalist work on a story that has like a tight turnaround, there's this interesting story that I saw on LinkedIn, because every now and then I'm on LinkedIn and I do regret it because it's a weird place to be. But they were talking about this journalist who, you know, recorded a press conference with a politician at an airport, and then recorded their pieces to camera, and then opened up their laptop, ingested the footage, edited it, and sent it on within, you know, 2 hours of, you know, everything starting up. And, you know, it happens at that pace, and it is wild because, you know, there are people who you don't see that very often. You know, journalists, you know, aren't the most successful of people, which is a whole other conversation to have at another time. And, you know, watching the amount of effort that is put into those kind of things, and you know, it extends to everything, you know, photography, videography, podcasting. I think I've talked about this before. You know, while there is such a low barrier for entry into podcasting, making good podcasting content, you know, there is a lot more effort that goes on in the background. And, you know, obviously, you know, our journeys with creating podcasts aren't over, but like, we've all come to the realization that we've come a long way in the last few years of, you know, the quality of content, the choice of content, and our processes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for coming on Content and Capable. I really love talking about probably one of the most fascinating aspects of the creative arts I find, and the one that I always keep coming back to. And I've really loved the perspective that you've shared today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was really I no one listens to me when I rant about film for an hour, so this has been a nice change of pace.
Yes, no, I'm always willing to listen to people rant and rave about the things they love. I think that's part of the reason why this podcast works so well, because I am just happy to listen.
Yeah, I don't know how content and capable I am with being a podcast or being a photographer, because I currently don't make much money off of it, but I think I got like one print sold one time for like a friend.
Yeah. But, it's a journey we're all on, and I think that it will be so fascinating to see and hear the adventures that we all get up to in our passions. Oftentimes we don't follow our passions very far, and when you are so passionate about something, I think it's always worth putting a little bit more time and effort and following to see where it ends up taking you.
No, I absolutely agree.
Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find my photography Instagram. It's called Negative Selections. Or you could just search my name, Jason Hilton. It'll probably come up. And it's a mostly it's just all my film stuff. You get a picture of me once in a blue moon. But it's mostly pictures of my cats and buildings around Richmond, but they're really pretty pictures of cats and buildings. So I would recommend checking that out.
Can confirm they are all very amazing pictures.
Thank you.
And are always amazing to look at. They whenever the Instagram algorithm decides to show those photos, because let's be honest, managing 3 or 4 Instagram accounts is a bad idea. Cannot wait to get rid of one of them at the end of the year. When I finally am on a feed and I've scrolled down far enough and I've gotten past, the posts that I've shared, it's often graced my feed towards the top, and it is always amazing. I'm like, wow, so pretty all the time.
I appreciate that.
Has there been any media that you've been consuming, playing, that you wanted to plug?
Oh God, yes, I've been watching. Let's see. Really, I've been kind of watching Doctor Who a lot because it's getting talked about on the Discord so often, so I'm kind of watching that. So yeah. I guess I would recommend Doctor Who from the Matt Smith era. That's the one I'm watching right now. And let's see. I don't know. I consume media like every different forms of media like every 15 minutes. I don't know if I could give you like a specific one, but yeah. As far as I'm trying to think of it's something new, something new-ish or unknown. No. Nah,
yeah. It's hard to think of what's new that has not been talked about 7,000 times. And I will definitely plug the Discord server. For as little as $1 a month, you can buy our friendship. And you can definitely hear the campaign that is currently going on the Discord for more Doctor Who content. I'm not sure where that's going. There will definitely be conversations about it, but it is an interesting topic.
It sure is.
And Doctor Who is just very fascinating to me. As someone who's never consumed it.
Yeah, it kind of falls with, because I also just read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for the first time recently, and that kind of just gets me into that British sci-fi mood for some reason.
Yeah, and I love the British sense of humor is
amazing.
Is just a highlight for me all the time. Well, you can find me on Instagram and on TikTok at sam.the.journalist and on Twitter at samobjournalist. As of recording, I had some hot takes about concerts. I recently went and saw AJR live. It was the first live concert I've actually ever been to.
Oh.
And I had some hot takes. Everything from you made us stand and wait too long to the poor behavior that concert goers had.
Oh my God, I know.
And everyone, I work at a radio station that works with live events very often, and it is a conversation we continue to have post-pandemic of people's poor behavior at concerts. But not even that, some of the decisions that were made around, supporting acts and like, there were
nothing can ruin. Yeah, that'll ruin your night, like a bad concert.
Yeah, it wasn't like a deal breaker, but it was something that like mildly irked me. And 48 hours later, when I finished off this Twitter thread, I was like, oh yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. Don't get me wrong. The $80 that I spent was definitely worth it. But I don't think.
Did I have to share it with so many people around me?
Yeah. Well, and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. Like, was this the best use of our money? And was there a better way to be a better responsible creator? Definitely go check that out. Or as always, head over to the Content and Capable Twitter and Instagram. That's content, the letter N, capable. For especially on Twitter, hot takes and out of context quotes from this week's episode. This week I'm going to plug a podcast called Cancelled from the Mamamia media network. Mamamia is this weird, it's not weird, it's an Australian women's media network. And they were actually my first foray into podcasts. I've recently gotten back into listening to their content. Beware, it's got some ads and bits and pieces in it. But they Cancelled by Claire and Jesse Stevens, what has been an insanely funny podcast. They just go through things that like people have tried to cancel.
Oh, that's funny.
From the whole concept of the Chris's from Hollywood through to, Kim Kardashian and all the problematic things that she's done, or the attempts to cancel, Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, who's tried to cancel Anne Hathaway? What'd she do?
The verdict was people think that she's too eager, and that's why they try to cancel her, and she really doesn't deserve it.
No, she doesn't.
But it's been hilarious. It's been what's making me giggle on my commute in and out of the city each day.
Yeah, the idea of canceling Kim Kardashian is cute, like, right?
Yeah. And it's just like the way that these two phrase it, it's not dry, but it's a very interesting style of humor that I really enjoy, of just like, let's talk about this ridiculous situation. And they're both journalists. They both like are very good at what they do, and they're just like taking the mickey out of, the situation that these people end up in. Anyway, thank you so much, Jason, for coming on Content and Capable. I've really loved having you on, and I cannot wait to see the amazing photos that will, as always, grace my Instagram feed in the future.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I had a really great time talking to you. This was fun. I haven't been on a podcast in a while.
Well, hopefully there'll be many more to come. Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. You can follow the podcast socials at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram and Twitter. You can send a super boring email to us through contentandcapablepod@gmail.com. The art was done by Opia. You can follow them on opia_art on Instagram. Opia is spelled OPIA. Feel free to message them about making art for your project. Our music was written, recorded, and edited by Nora Strauss-Riggs. You can find Nora at Kane_I, that's I as in the body part, on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to message her about making music for your project or editing your podcast.
What's up, potheads? It's me, your host, Christina. Welcome to the restricted section. No, we're not in Hogwarts. It's like a metaphor. Do you get it? Like, we're raunchy, and we get drunk, and we make sex jokes, and we have an all spoilers all the time policy, so, it's like the restricted section. I've been told that explaining jokes makes them funnier. If you've ever wondered how the Marauders map actually works, if you've ever thought that maybe Snape sometimes wears jeans, if you've ever thought that Draco and Harry are for sure in love, they're for sure in love. If you've ever had a hard time deciding who you'd rather bang, Bill or Charlie, obviously Charlie, then this podcast is for you. You don't even have to do the reading, we'll do it for you. Catch the Restricted Section every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts, and find us online at Restricted Section Pod.
Content and Capable is a podcast all about answering the question, how do you adult? Don't forget to rate and review it on your favourite podcatcher, and I will see you next Monday for another episode.
Deus Ex Media.